On today's show, we make our all NBA selections as if the new CBA rules were put in place. Who's going to be eliminated because of the 65 game minimum? And how does this open the door for other players? And can we make an exception? That's all coming up next.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On NBA. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Darian Vaziri from Locked On Clippers. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Let's jump right in. We're going to be doing our all NBA selections, but with a twist. With the new CBA, the league is going to be implementing new rules for end-of-season awards, including a 65 games played minimum and making all NBA positionless, as opposed to the current system with a no games played minimum and traditional positions across the three teams. So even though the new rules won't be in effect until next season, we thought it would be fun to do our all NBA selections as if these rules were to apply today for this season. I think it's a good exercise to see how some of these players who we would normally have on our All-NBA list, what would happen if they couldn't make it, how it would impact the teams, the awards, how it would open the door for some of these other players to get into an All-NBA selection. So right off the bat, the 65-game minimum eliminates superstars. We're talking about no Steph. You can't have LeBron, no KD, also no John Morant, no Anthony Davis, no Devin Booker, no Paul George, no Kawhi Leonard, no James Harden. So already, again, a bunch of names that we're accustomed to seeing on All-NBA, those voters will not be able to vote for them. So, Darian, I'll ask you first, before we get into our first team here, which one of those is the toughest for you to eliminate?
Well, Wes, I don't think it's tough for me to eliminate certain guys when they've missed almost 20 games. I think part of a regular season award is your availability. And throughout history, we've always seen the guys that do make these lists, the guys that do win MVP, usually have played upwards of 70 games. So to answer the question, I'm going to have to go be a homer here. The Clippers are the 5th seed, and our best player has been Kawhi Leonard coming off a torn ACL, and I think he's been better than I expected. He's been closer to that 2021 Kawhi Leonard than people have expected. So just for the sake of, I think it's super close with everybody and nobody clearly stands out, I'm going to go with Kawhi. But obviously having Steph Curry, who I still believe is a top 5 player in the NBA, not make the list is definitely tough to leave off. So my unbiased answer would be Curry, but my slightly biased answer would be Kawhi.
I think Kawhi is going to make an All-NBA team, or he's going to get a lot of votes. I don't know if he'll make the 3 teams. He's only he hasn't played a lot of games. He's only played 50 games so far this year, but since the All-Star break, he's been awesome. 27 points a game on almost 55% shooting, 50% from three-point range. He's been insane, 6.5 rebounds, almost 4 assists. Like, he's been awesome. He's been absolutely awesome. If you wanted to put him all on your All-NBA, I guess this would be the last year where you could probably do it. And Kawhi is going to be one of these guys, too, where him hitting that 65-game minimum is going to be tough most years if he's going to be on like this load management and kind of doing what he's been doing the last few years. This could be the last chance for Kawhi to make an All-NBA team, which sounds crazy.
For real.
But
yeah,
it very much could be in play. And I'm with you on Steph, by the way. He's played 54 games so far. I think a lot of people are still thinking about making him a first-team guard, and I have him on my short list for my real All-NBA kind of team. But because of the 65-game minimum, there's no way he's going to reach that, and he's eliminated. And there's no real loophole for him. He got hurt. He was out for a long time. And unfortunately, although he's been amazing when he's on the court, full-blown Steph Curry, MVP level guy, people talking about him as an MVP after the first couple months of the year, but you haven't played enough. And them's the breaks, I guess. So let's just jump right into our first team then. Again, the other part of this, not just a 65-game minimum, it's positionless, right? So this year, there's only 1 center, 2 forwards, 2 guards. That's how basketball works. So people are going to have to pick, for example, between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic for their first team center. And one of those guys, just like last year, is going to end up being moved to the second team. That's going to happen. I feel like now that, next year when it's positionless, this kind of feels like it's the Joel Embiid / Nikola Jokic rule. Like this is sort of a way to make sure that both of those guys get on the first team. What do you think about that? Because there was such a hoopla last year about the fact that one of those guys was going to have to go second team, even though they were going to clearly finish 1-2 MVP. Can we just call this like the Embiid Jokic clause?
Oh, absolutely. I think also you have not in this particular last 2 years, but a couple of years ago, you would have a situation where you had 2 point guards where you figured probably should have made the team. I mean, we're in an era where it's a very guard heavy league, and there's been
Yeah.
so many years where you had guys like I don't remember what it was like in 2017. I don't remember the exact first team, but you had Westbrook and Harden putting up MVP seasons, and then Steph Curry doing just a normal Steph Curry season that
Yeah.
we became so accustomed to seeing.
So like Chris
So
Paul doing his thing, Damian Lillard. Yeah, it was like those 5 every time, just
yeah.
sort of
So
round
I think
robining.
it's definitely fair. The only person it's or people it's unfair for, I think, rest in peace to the late great Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell that wish they could have gotten that in their era
Yeah.
because they had to exchange first team selections, even though they were like top 2, top 3 in MVP voting many years. But overall, yeah, I think it's more fair for the players. And in an era that we label positionless, I think it makes it more fair to the best 5 players of a season because, yeah, hearing Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, one of them being second team after they've been undoubtedly a top 3 player in regular seasons the last 3 years, it's definitely tough.
My guess, this is more of a prediction, is that even though there is positionless, and you could, if you wanted, vote 5 centers, 5 big men, whatever you wanted to do, 5 kind of front court positions, you can make that your first team. Same thing, you could do 5 guards. My prediction is that voters are going to want this to kind of still look like a basketball team. I don't think that we're going to really have a year where it's just going to be 5 big men making up the first team. I still think that you're going to have ball handlers. You're still going to have centers. You're going to it creates some more optionality to it and what you want to do with that first team and all the teams for that matter. But my prediction is that voters kind of have their habits and they're going to want this to look a certain way. That said, how does your first team look? Who's like, let's go top 3 just shoo-ins. Is it the top 3 guys in the MVP, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Giannis? You've got all 3 of them now that we're allowed to have both centers?
Of course.
Okay. So I've got the same thing. I think that's easy. I'm going to round out my first team with Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic. It's nothing crazy here. I did debate keeping Luka off of my first team, given that Dallas is probably, or it looks like they could miss the playoffs and how disappointing this year is. But his stats are just incredible. 33 points a game, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, right around that range. For the most part, he's been awesome. He's been in the MVP conversation for most of the year, although he would not be in my top 5 if I were voting on MVP right now. But in terms of just outstanding players, the 5 most outstanding players, I think he has been that this year. He's played enough games, so those are my next 2 is Tatum and Luka.
I was almost 5 for 5 with you. I have Tatum, but because of what you said about the Dallas Mavericks having a disappointing season, I'm going with a guy. This also could be a little bit of a homer pick, but I'm going with a guy that has overachieved and his team is doing far better than
Know
everybody
exactly where you're
expected.
going with this.
Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean,
I
this
debated
guy.
it.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was obviously, a Clipper for 1 year, and I knew he was going to be a great player. But what we've seen this season, I cannot believe how he's ascended like this. And to average 31 points a game, I mean, besides Josh Giddey and Jalen Williams, who's really kind of risen to the occasion. I think it's the Jalen with the EN, not the IN. They have 2 of them in that starting lineup. But the casual fan may not be able to name 5 or 6 players on that team. I mean, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has come such a long way, and for me, he's my first team pick. But I'm obviously not going to be mad at Luka. The stats he's putting up are unbelievable. But yeah, I'm going to go with SGA.
Like I said, I really thought hard about SGA. I also thought really hard about Domantas Sabonis. If I really just wanted to go full positionless, that to me, Sabonis would be 5th on my MVP ballot. And I was like, well, if my top 5 on my MVP is Embiid, Jokic, Giannis in whatever order, that's not the debate we're having today, and then Tatum probably still. I thought I think I would have Sabonis number 5. Then why wouldn't he be on my first team All NBA if those would be my my top 5 MVP guys? And I just think that MVP is a little bit different than All NBA. I still think All NBA is sort of the most outstanding players for the season, where MVP really is sort of most valuable to your team and to winning for that matter. And I think what Sabonis has done for the Sacramento Kings and how he's transformed that franchise, basically him and De'Aaron Fox, and the fact that Sacramento is a top 3 seed in the West while Dallas could miss the playoffs. To me, winning matters more, like team success matters more for MVP than it does All NBA. But with that being said, yeah, the Thunder are better than the Mavericks. So I just wonder if, maybe there is an argument to have SGA He's shooting 51% overall, 35% from three-point range. So his percentages are better than Luka. Luka's averaging 32.7 points per game. SGA's at 31.5, so it's not far off. The difference to me is that Luka's averaging 8.7 rebounds and 8.1 assists, and SGA is 4.8 rebounds, 5.4 assists. The Mavericks are 1.9 points better when Luka's on the court, 2.1 points better when SGA is on the court for the Thunder. So it's not all that different. I just think Luka's been awesome. He plays more minutes. I don't know, but we're splitting hairs right now. If you have SGA, I have no problem with that. And by the way, in the real All NBA where you can't have Jokic and Embiid this year, I think it's going to be Luka and SGA on the real first team, right? And so at least that's what I would have, and I think a lot of voters will go that way anyway. All right, so the first team, I really don't even think that was all that interesting. To me, it gets really interesting when we talk about second and third teams. We're going to get the second team next, and for me, it does feature an exception to the 65-game rule. We'll talk about that next, but first, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by the Nissan Ariya, Nissan's most electric player of the week, brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. And our Nissan most electric player of the week has to go to Joel Embiid. We're talking about guys on that first team, talking about guys with the MVP. A lot of people are saying Embiid's weak. He's locked up the MVP with his performance this week, 52 points the other night. In a huge win. He's averaging 40 points per game on the month for the month, 62% shooting, 11 rebounds, 5.5 assists. Joel Embiid's been awesome. And if he does end up winning MVP, you can credit this week possibly for him kind of taking the lead there. Let's talk about some words that describe the Nissan Ariya. Electric, brilliantly fierce, fiercely elegant, stunningly powerful. All of these words could also be used to describe Joel Embiid. So the 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin you to your seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Let's jump into our second team. Darian, all right, let me just list who I have here. I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because I had him on my – you had him on your first team. I did not, so I have him here on my second team, SGA. I've got Jaylen Brown, Donovan Mitchell, Jimmy Butler, and Domantas Sabonis. Those are my 5 on my second team. What do you think? How does that differ from yours?
I had 3 of the same players. I also had Domantas Sabonis, Donovan Mitchell, and Jaylen Brown. And obviously, I have Luka instead of SGA there. We just swapped those first and second team. But instead of Jimmy Butler, I'm going with 2 Sacramento Kings, honestly. I'm going to go with De'Aaron Fox. I think his stats have just been incredible. The way he's closed out games has been as good as anybody in the league. And for the Sacramento Kings to get the 3rd seed, I just feel like I had to show them some love. So De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis, I have them both on my second team.
So I have 2 guards, 2 forwards, and a center on my second team. So it looks very traditional. You have what, 3 guards then?
Does Jaylen Brown count as – oh, yeah, I do have 3 guards.
I guess he's a guard forward. Yeah, I have Jaylen Brown
Luka,
too.
but no, Luka, De'Aaron, and Donovan is 3 guards. So, yes, I do.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got so now you're a little bit less traditional than in what I have. So this is where, to me, the second team gets tough because you can't vote. There's no Devin Booker. I think Devin Booker is going to make a lot of second team ballots this year, but he's played just 52 games. Kyrie, you can't vote for him, 60 games. Ja Morant, 60 games. And Ja Morant, I think, is going to be on a lot of All-NBA lists. Like I said, if this was a normal All-NBA that we were doing, I would have Ja Morant on one of my first 3 teams. I'd probably have him on my 3rd team. But he's going to get some second team love here. But he's played 60 games. If he plays the next 2 for Memphis, he's going to finish the year with 62. Obviously not making that 65-game minimum. And when we talk about exceptions to the rule, there is some, according to the reporting around the new CBA, there is technically a route for players that don't make that 65-game minimum to sort of apply for an exception here. And it would actually go to arbitration between the league and the Players Association and I suppose the team in that instance. And with Ja Morant, because it was a suspension and not an injury and not like taking the second night off of back-to-backs and all these things, I would guess that Memphis in this circumstance would probably apply for that exception. But given that it was an NBA leveraged suspension, you probably wouldn't get it. I can't imagine that the NBA would be like, yeah, we suspended you, but we're also going to cut you a break and let you be eligible for one of these all NBA teams. It figures like that would also be part of the punishment, right?
Yeah.
All right, so no John Morant then. No Anthony Davis, 54 games. We already mentioned no Kevin Durant, no LeBron. So I think Kevin Durant and LeBron, they've missed so many games. Durant's played just 46. LeBron's played 53. I don't think either of them are going to make first team, but those guys they're going to get votes for second and third team. So the fact that you can't vote for them, it really does open the door. Back to your team, no Kawhi, no Paul George. Zion's not going to be eligible, although I don't think he's going to get many votes this year because he's only played 29 games anyway. This is tough, man. Like, this is really hard. And so I like the guys that I ended up with: SGA, Jaylen Brown, Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell, Domantas Sabonis. I think all of those guys would still be all on one of the 3 all NBA teams anyway for me. But a couple of them getting bumped up to the second team, given who is missed here. What was to you sort of like the hardest kind of, well, who's your fifth guy in? Who was like the last person into your second team?
I would say it was between De'Aaron Fox and Luka, because even though Luka's got the stats, all these other players, I feel like their seasons in terms of their team. And yeah, it goes back to that conversation of whether you weigh how much you weigh the team's success versus just the individual stats. Because one thing about a lot of the stats that we're looking at is we don't see the defensive side of things. You know, when we read it, points, rebounds, assists, and field goal percentage, we don't see the night-to-night defensive effort that these guys are bringing. That really only comes from watching them on a nightly basis or watching them very frequently. So that's where I kind of just get really confused. Yeah, exactly. So, and he came out and even admitted, he said, I got to be better defensively. And obviously that ties into how much weight he's had to carry offensively throughout the season. But De'Aaron Fox, I just think when you look at, I think this was the ultimate decider for me, is the Mavs have lost, I think it was, I read 19 crunch time games just since Kyrie has arrived. So that's probably 20 plus close losses throughout the season. And Luka Doncic is one of the players that, as a Clipper fan, I fear the most at the end of games. Now, I'm not saying those losses are all Luka's fault, but it is the stars that are supposed to take you home. And De'Aaron Fox has really taken the Sacramento Kings home in so many games this year. So that was my last one. I think Anthony Edwards was somebody that I kind of wrestled with, just because I think he's had a really good year, even with Karl Anthony Towns out, and he's been more available than these guys. But ultimately, I went with Luka to be my final second team member, as well as De'Aaron Fox.
So I don't have De'Aaron Fox on any of my teams.
Wow.
Yeah, and I did. He was on my short list. He ultimately didn't make it. I had him on there for a while. And by the way, I think
even with no Harden or John Morant.
No James Harden, no John Morant. Yeah, James Harden just 57 games. He's going to be off. No Tyrese Halliburton, 56 games for him. So I really seriously debated. I think I have a guard that you probably don't have, is my guess. I also ended up, and with Jokic getting moved into that first team along with Joel Embiid, because, again, voters are going to have to pick one of them this year. That kind of opens up the door for another front court player down the line, and that ends up making an appearance on my third team. But I love De'Aaron Fox. I really kind of wish I would have him on my first team, but I felt like there was enough Kings representation with Domantas Sabonis. I don't know. That's just where I ended up. For me, the last guy on mine was Donovan Mitchell. Love Donovan Mitchell. The stats are great. I think he's going to get first team votes IRL. We'll see if he actually makes it. But, I thought I toyed with Donovan Mitchell and some of these other guards that are including De'Aaron Fox. Like that's the thing. And like the real all NBA this year, there's so many guards that are so close. Like somebody can have Donovan Mitchell on their third team or their first team. And I think that either argument is fine. Like these guards, outside of really, to me, Luka and SGA, I don't know. It feels like those guys have pulled away, but everybody else, it feels really bunched up in terms of the guards in the real all NBA awards.
I have a feeling I know who your third team guard is that I left off now, and I'm like, should I have had him on there? I think I know who it is now.
Well, we're going to talk about that next, and this is where I thought it got the hardest. It's where positionless really came into play, and it's where the exception to the rule also comes into play, the John Morant rule that we discussed. That's coming up next. But first, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use, and then you have to bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. The play-in tournament is coming up. It's high stakes. You got these teams trying to get into the playoffs. I think that's when the best players rise to the occasion. And so I don't know, we don't have it yet, but when we look at the lines for the Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler, what's his points per game? You can vote. You could bet on player props like that. You can obviously bet on the money line if you think that the Heat are going to win their play-in game. Looks like they're going to be locked into that 7th seed. You can do it all at FanDuel. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at bigger payouts with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Please do subscribe on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you get the show. All right. 3rd team All-NBA using the new rules, 65 game played minimum. It's positionless. These are the rules that the NBA is going to implement next season, not necessarily this season. But this has been fun so far. Still, I don't think I have anybody in my top 10 so far that is like off the board, kind of sneaking in because of positionless, because of 65 games. I feel pretty good about my 10 guys. How about you?
10 guys? Oh, you're talking about on the first two teams?
Yeah, the first 2 teams, our first 10.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about them.
All right, so this is where it gets weird. 3rd team. Again, guys that could have been in play for the 3rd team, like LeBron, Durant, Steph, Devin Booker, Kyrie Irving, John Morant, Anthony Davis. Can't vote for him. Not allowed. Don't meet the 65 game minimum. There is one player, though, who is not going to meet the 65 game minimum this year, but I think could hypothetically, in this case, apply for an exception, and I think probably get that exception, and that's Damian Lillard. Lillard's played just 58 games this year, but not because of injury, not necessarily because, I mean, he did have an injury earlier, but not just because of injury, not because he's resting second nights of a back-to-back, nothing like load management, nothing like that. The fact that the Portland Trail Blazers basically shut him down in order for them to tank and improve their lottery position, that's not Damian Lillard's fault. And I think if there is this loophole that's going to allow players to kind of go to arbitration and apply to be allowed to be eligible for end of season awards and for all NBA, I think this is a situation that makes sense. And I think this is, if this were to apply this year, I think the NBA would say, you know what? It's Damian Lillard. He's been in the league forever. He's an all NBA kind of guy. His stats are crazy. And it's not his fault that his team sucks and they just want to shut him down and try to improve and just try to tank like the last 2 weeks of the season. So I have Damian Lillard on my 3rd team, even though he doesn't meet the 65 game minimum. I think this is a situation where he could go to arbitration and earn eligibility. So I've got Lillard as one of my guys on my 3rd team. Did you have Lillard on your 3rd team?
I did not. Dame, I mean, you said it best. You can make a great case for him. The fact that he's averaging a career high in points after all these years, in his 11th season, averaging a career high in points, coming off an injury like that where he basically missed, 3/4 of the season or half the season.
Yep.
He's amazing. But there's still just so many good guards out there. And at the end of the day, it really all comes down to how much you value winning and the team expectation and what those players have achieved with their teams or the individual stats. And I think that's where these conversations, really go in the end.
Yeah, so I had Lillard on my 3rd team, which meant I did not have De'Aaron Fox. I really thought about putting De'Aaron Fox ahead of Damian Lillard. You obviously did do that. I have no problem with that. I could even go that way. I just sort of depends on the day. That's how close these guards are. But I thought that Lillard, I mean, you just look at his stats, man. He's the 3rd leading scorer in the NBA. 32.2 points per game, 46% shooting, 37% from 3, 7.3 assists. You could argue he's never been better. The fact that the Trailblazers stink is not his fault. And so, yeah, when it gets to 3rd team, yeah, winning to me, that sort of is a separator for 1st and 2nd team. But the dude is just one of the best 3 scorers in the NBA. It just feels weird not to have him on 3rd team at the very least. So I have Lillard. If you wanted to go in another direction, you could. Rounding out my 3rd team, I have Jalen Brunson.
That was it. That was the one guard. I knew you were going to have it. I didn't. I was like, oh, man, he's been so great.
Yeah, I just think he controls the game. I don't know. Again, it's like it was a 3-guard race between Brunson, Lillard, and De'Aaron Fox. If you want to talk me into De'Aaron Fox on the 3rd team, I'm open to it. I just think Jalen Brunson has been such a huge reason for the Knicks' success this year. And I felt like the Kings had enough representation with Sabonis on the 2nd team, almost my 1st team, that I ended up going Jalen Brunson here. I've got DeMar DeRozan, who gets in basically because there's no Kawhi, no LeBron, no KD. DeRozan's been great for the Bulls. And so I've got him. I've got Julius Randle again because there's no other forwards, and Randle's probably going to make an appearance on a lot of NBA teams. And then this is where it got hard. So a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr., and I think this is a good time to have this conversation. His defensive metrics are amazing.
Right.
He's the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year, but he's only played 62 games this year. If he plays the next two Grizzlies games, he's only going to play 64. So if you wanted to vote for him for Defensive Player of the Year, under next year's rules, you couldn't. And Jaren Jackson, despite the amazing shot blocking numbers, the fact that he's only allowing like 49% of shots to go in around the rim, like his numbers are crazy. I think he deserves Defensive Player of the Year. I have no problem with the fact that he's missed so many games because he's been that dominant when he's been on the court. But under the new rules, if you wanted to vote for him, you couldn't. And you'd have to go somewhere else. Brooke Lopez, OG Anunoby, Nick Claxton, Bam Adebayo, like whoever else you wanted to go with it. So Jaren Jackson Jr. does not he can't be considered for my third team. Couldn't even be considered for Defensive Player of the Year. That kind of stinks for somebody like Jaren Jackson. I do wonder like how voters are going to handle that.
That is really interesting. And it's tough because Jaren Jackson actually hasn't missed too many games since he missed the beginning of the season. He missed the beginning of the season with an actual injury. So his season started a little bit later.
Right.
So it is pretty harsh for him. I will say, going forward, this really, to me, impacts certain players and teams deciding whether or not guys are going to load manage. Because when guys are actually injured, they're going to be missing games. Now you're missing the additional games based on precaution and rest. Those 3 or 4 games you miss with load management, plus those, let's say, 13 games you miss from an injury, that's 17 games right there. So I think it'll be definitely an impact going forward, depending on how much those individual players want those All NBA awards. But it's definitely,
and like you said, it was sort of an offseason thing that he was dealing with, and he obviously had to miss the start of the regular season. I do wonder if, like, it's easy to do that math, right? Like, if you're going to miss 20 plus games at the start of the season, you're probably not going to be eligible for these things. Like Kawhi missed so much time at the beginning of the year. Jaren Jackson missed all that time. Does this lead players, teams who have it's not just the award, like the honor of being on one of these All NBA teams. Like there's financial stuff at play here when you're talking about extensions and things like that, which is ultimately why the NBA, I think, made it positionless, is so that they can help these guys who actually deserve the extensions be eligible for those supermax extensions. And a guy like Jaren Jackson is one of those kinds of players. Does he try to rush back earlier in the season in order to make himself eligible? Is it in his best financial interest to maybe rush back from an injury and play like whatever? I don't know. Instead of coming out and playing 25 minutes a night, does he just come back and try to play 10 minutes a night just to get the games played under his belt? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how players and teams respond to this and how they interact with it. My last guy was Pascal Siakam. And this was really where that extra forward spot comes into play, because based on my top 15, I would have had to have another guard. I probably would have I would have had to have another. I think I would have had another guard, because I only had one guard on my first team. Yeah, because I only had Luka on my first team. So I would have had to have another guard. So probably would have had Jalen Brunson on my second team. And then I think I would have had Lillard and De'Aaron Fox, your guy, on my third team, which would have pushed Siakam out. My last 3 that I was sort of playing with for the 15th spot here was Siakam, De'Aaron Fox, and Lauri Markkanen. I ultimately went with Siakam.
So your third team was Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, Damian Lillard, DeMar DeRozan, and Pascal.
Yep.
Okay, so this is where I think it's going to get interesting, because I actually had a couple of different picks. I had, I'm going to make a change. I had Jalen Brunson. I'm going to put Jalen Brunson on my team because I got to have one Nick in there. But I also had Jimmy Butler. You had him on the second team, right?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. This is interesting because I think everybody, like the Knicks, deserve somebody on All NBA. I think a lot of people are going to go Julius Randle, but I think you and I are on the same page where we're giving more credit to Jalen Brunson than Julius Randle's been awesome. He's averaging a double-double. He's great. I have him on my third team, so there's nothing against Julius Randle. But I think a lot of people in the real All NBA voting are probably going to go with one of them. I don't know. And you've got Brunson over Randle. I think a lot of voters have Randle over Brunson. Is that where you're at?
I have Brunson over Randle just because I have a lot of friends in New York, and they are higher on what Brunson does for the team than Randle, because at the end of games, they really trust Brunson's IQ to take them home and to make those plays. As you said, he's kind of a calming presence. And Randle, he loses control of his emotions a lot as a leader. And I think that even though he's really stepped it up this season, it seems like the general consensus in New York right now from Knicks fans is that Brunson is that guy. and that's why I included him. But man, there's so
That's
many
kind of
great
where I ended
players.
up too, is because the Randall stats are undeniable. Like
Right.
the shooting percentages are good, the points, the rebound, everything is good. But when I watch the Knicks games, I just feel like Jalen Brunson is making a bigger impact and is more important to that team. So I went eye test feel. I went with Jalen Brunson over just raw. And by the way, it's not like Brunson's stats are not good. Brunson's
Yeah.
averaging, he's in the running for most improved for a reason. He's averaging career highs across the board, so he's awesome. So I'm with you. I went Brunson just because I watched those games. I think it just looks like he's more important to the Knicks than even Julius Randle is. That said, I interrupted you. Who was your
That's
last guy
okay.
on your third team?
I had Anthony Edwards in there. I have Anthony Edwards because I think that the Wolves, they're still going to be in play-in territory. I think he's had a really good season. He's taken a leap. He's become an all-star this year. And what I've really noticed about Ant this season is defensively he's taken a step up. I mean, he's got the tools in terms of like his physical build, but he's got those long arms. And oftentimes when I watch the Wolves play, he's guarding the better players. And I really respect that. So I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards on my team. But there was two guys that I
had
picked
Anthony
the
Edwards
weekend.
on my long list. I love the pick. I love Anthony Edwards. He's played the second most minutes in the league.
Yeah.
His averages are great. Defensively, I agree with you. He's really stepped up, especially the second half of the year. Really, when they kind of got Mike Conley, I feel like also he's been really helpful there for him. So he was on my long list, didn't make it. But your other guys.
Yeah. Ant and Brunson, so they're my two. I had Jimmy Butler in there instead
Okay.
of you had him on the second team, right?
Right.
I had Jimmy Butler. And then I also was thinking of going with Pascal, but let me ask you this. Aren't you the host of Locked On Heat?
I am.
So what do you think about Bam Adebayo's case?
I had him on my long list too. I think Bam's been amazing this year. I think what he does defensively still doesn't show up in the box score, doesn't show up in the stats. He's so important. I love the leap that he's made offensively, but it has tailed off since the All-Star break. The assist numbers aren't where they've used to be. The rebounding numbers aren't where they used to be. But he was on my list. He was sort of on my short list too. But I also think the Heat are a playing team, man. Like, why should they get? Maybe it doesn't make. I don't feel comfortable giving them two guys. To me, Jimmy Butler has clearly been their best player this year at this point. I made the opposite case going into the All-Star break.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say in the beginning of the season, people were saying that Bam was the best player on the Heat. Okay, so it just switched.
Yep. Yeah, Jimmy's been that good. Like when push came to shove and the Heat had to win games to try to get into this play-in tournament, because it was a little dicey there for a while. It was Jimmy Butler who kind of reminded everybody that he's still the best player on the team. So and his advanced stats are crazy. Like you could make a case that he should be fifth on MVP ballots based on some of these advanced stats.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, so I ended up having Jimmy Butler, and I just didn't feel comfortable going with another Heat player, given that they're seventh in the Eastern Conference, and I don't have a Raptor on there. I put Siakam on there. His averages are really good. He's been really important to Toronto. Scotty Barnes, I kind of toyed with a little bit, but not for all NBA. He's come along really strong, especially since they got Jakob Poeltl. But to me, Siakam's been their best player all year long. And has had to play a few different kind of roles for them.
Yeah, so you know what? Let me scratch that. I'm going to take Bam Adebayo out, and I'm going to put in Pascal Siakam. But my fifth
I didn't mean to talk you out of Bam. Somebody.
You made a good point, though. I can't have two Miami Heat guys, and when you're having kind of an underwhelming season. I had a question for you, though. You elected of putting two Knicks guys in there instead of two Kings guys.
I know. I went against my own argument. It was a counter argument. To me, I don't know. I'm starting to regret not having De'Aaron Fox on.
So instead of my Randall pick, though, you should. I'm still going to keep pushing the De'Aaron propaganda, but after the Randall pick, instead of him, I'm going with one you didn't mention. And I know the stats don't do him justice, but every time you watch him play, he's so good to me. Drew Holiday. I had him on there just because, what the Bucks are doing is insane. I mean, number one seed with Middleton missing so many games. Even Giannis has missed like 17 games. And you just will never, with the basic box score, you'll just never be able to see what Drew Holiday does. But for him to be like the primary ball handler for that team at times and then guard the best players in these so good closing games, made the All-Star team again this year. I don't know why. I just have a feeling he's going to make the third team. I could be wrong, but I'm a big defense guy, so I got to go with Drew.
Drew's been awesome. I love Drew Holiday. I've loved him for a long time. I have no problem with him being on the third team. I'm going to let you pick. DeMar DeRozan or Julius Randle get kicked off for De'Aaron Fox off my third team. Who you kick?
Do we already have Brunson on there?
I've got Brunson on there.
Let's go. We'll give DeMar his flowers. He's from Compton, and he's a USC guy, so I got to give him his flowers.
I'm okay knocking off a Nick. That's fine. Sorry, Knicks. It's been a good year. De'Aaron Fox is on there. Julius Randle's out. Boom. I like it. All right. This was interesting, wasn't it? I think if
Have
we
fun.
did the 65 game minimum positionless, I when you kind of look at it, all you have to really do is, all right, who are the top 15 guys in the NBA this year? And I feel like we're pretty close to what that is. I feel like we're pretty close. And I could even put Bam in there. I could put Bam in there. I don't know. It's tough. The third team is going to be really interesting, I think. More interesting than ever now for voters on All NBA, because the difference between like the 14th best player and like the 20th best player feels like there's not that much of a difference, where I feel like most years we have a pretty clear idea of who like the top 5 to 8 guys are any given year. So this should be pretty interesting. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen today. Now make your second listen. Game to game NBA, every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Darian, have a great weekend.
You too.